I just want to start off by letting you know who we are. You might not have yet heard of Seer Data. So I'm the founder and CEO, and Seer Data is an Australian purpose-led technology company. We've been working with place-based initiatives, community organisations, not-for-profits, corporates, philanthropists and governments for the past 8 years to turn data and now AI into action for a better world. We have a very rich ecosystem. We started at the grassroots. For many of you who are on the call today who we work with, you will know that around a third of our customers are First Nations-led organisations and place-based initiatives. And we've been working to enable data access, sharing and storytelling for a range of different use cases in communities around Australia. We also support data governance and sharing so that the impact of that information and the work that's going on the ground can be shared with funders. And so we work with governments as well as philanthropic funders to understand the portfolio of impact and also to share data across the ecosystem. So it's a rich ecosystem that we're working in, and we start at the grassroots and share data through to for decision making at all levels through the chain. So we really have two platforms. Our data technology and where we started, Seer Communities, was co-designed with communities all over Australia. And we provide access to publicly available data, open data, and then you can add your own data, operational data, outcomes data, and connect into your systems to make that live. We've built in data governance and sharing capabilities, storytelling capabilities, and as I mentioned earlier, we operationalise First Nations data governance and sovereignty. Our learnings through working with our community organisations, governments and First Nations organisations has led us to building our new platform, Seer Impact. And this is our enterprise-wide commitment tracking and reporting platform. We support program measurement and evaluation. We connect disparate data systems and data to internal and recognised indicators and frameworks for auditable reporting. We are proving social impact and enabling storytelling for transparency in Seer Impact. What is also really important is we're building on our work in Seer Communities with built-in data governance and AI assurance aligned to the standards and voluntary guardrails for safe and responsible use of AI. We have a really rich, amazing customer base. We're very fortunate to get to work with some of the incredible leading organisations around Australia and soon internationally. And we thank you for working with us. And we have incredible partners. Today, I'm thrilled that Strategic Grants and Info Exchange are helping us as we navigate and share our knowledge with you today on this important topic. So let's get to it. As we know, the AI trust crisis is here, and AI adoption is absolutely surging. Fear of missing out is high, but it's hard to know how to be safe and responsible. So this is what this conversation is about today. We know that there are a number of elements that are impacting this, including low AI literacy within the not-for-profit sector, including boards and executives, and weak governance that's creating what we would say is a complex risk environment. And as a result, shadow use of AI is common. And so we're going to talk about that and how to mitigate. Lack of knowledge and resources exist. And so we're aiming with our partners to fill that gap to ensure transparency, accountability, and of course, ethical use of AI. So Ian, I'm going to start with you for our first question. Are we in an AI trust crisis?
Thanks, Christy. That is such a big question, and it's brought about because of a couple of reasons. If you'd asked that question 3 years ago, 4 years ago, before generative AI came along, very few people are accidentally building predictors or classifiers on their desk and then trying to predict different outcomes. If you were doing it, you needed to be an expert. You needed to spend a lot of time and effort. You needed to really dedicate resources to try and come up with something, and then you'd show results and maybe you'd take it a step further. The challenge now is that generative AI is so easy to use, and there are so many different applications that you can use, from of course, the one we all know about, ChatGPT, to Character AI, to you name it, .ai. And they're so easy to use, and they look so simple, and they look so much like just accessing a website. So many people are using generative AI or using AI applications without some cases even knowing they're using them. And that leads to some really big challenges. The first challenge is it looks really simple just to enter this great big document that you're supposed to read into a website and get all these insights back, except what you've possibly just done is revealed a whole lot of potentially confidential information or sensitive information and literally given it to a company who then use it for their own purposes, and you get back your insights, but it doesn't feel that way. It also leads to people having a really misplaced understanding of what you can do with AI. It seems so simple to generate a picture of a sunflower wearing sunglasses, for example. So surely it must be just as easy to do something really important, not something trivial. So you wind up with these really differing perspectives on whether or not you should use AI at all, because there's a risk of doing bad things with good people doing bad things with information they shouldn't be sharing, or misplaced understanding of just how difficult it is to get something valuable out of AI. So it leads to a lot of people doing a lot of pretty dumb things and a whole lot of other people just really being gun shy of AI. And it's often the case that the effort that people need to go to think about appropriate use is not, most people don't have the frameworks to think about it. Christy, you mentioned that the ISO IEC Subcommittee 42 is meeting here in Sydney. There are literally hundreds of people in Sydney who are working through elements of standards for AI, all the way through from thinking about data to thinking about bias to thinking about systems management and even doing some sort of assurance assessment. But most people on this call, I put it out there, most people on this call are probably never going to pick up an ISO IEC standard and read it, and are probably not going to go to the trouble or put the effort in to try and understand the really detailed engineering mechanics of how to think about AI. So it leads to a pretty bad situation where people are either really not willing to or overly confident and not really understanding the consequences. So it's important to think about, actually, what do I need to do? What are the fundamentals I need to do to protect my data, to adhere to privacy policies, to adhere to my cybersecurity policies, to do the things that I promised I would do in an organization, while still allowing people the space to experiment appropriately and safely so they can start to explore what AI can actually do. There's an awful lot of work to be done in this space. And as mentioned, the ISO IEC 42000 series of standards are really important. But if you're not the person to ever pick it up and read it, you need the people you work with who do use AI to be aware of it, to understand it. And also, of course, the best example I've seen is the New South Wales AI Assurance Framework, which helps you think through appropriate uses of AI and think through issues related to what happens if I use this sort of data versus not, what happens if I use this data quality versus not, what happens if I use this type of algorithm or not, and how do I think about appropriate use of the products I create from AI. So it's a very long answer. I'm sorry, Christy. You pulled on a really important thread. The consequence of not being aware of or using or applying frameworks means that we kind of get both ends of the spectrum, neither of which are good, around either being overly confident or overly concerned about AI.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, I mean, what you touched on a lot there around, the importance of AI assurance. It's clearly the standard. But one of the challenges, of course, for the not-for-profit sector and the philanthropic sector is how to adopt those standards ethically. So we'll get to that in a minute. And Ian, before I ask the next question, I just wanted to check in and get your take, Brian, on this. From your perspective, having worked with so many SaaS and AI businesses around the world, what's your take? Are we in an AI trust crisis?
Yeah, I think it depends what kind of organization you're in. Obviously, I come from more of a corporate background, and we've just seen an absolute explosion over there of deployment of AI. And I think if you ask folks in a different setting like that, they might have a different opinion. But I think when you look at the acceleration that's happening in this setting as well, you got to say that really we're in more of a crisis of confidence than capability. The tools are brilliant, but leaders are being told every day that they're going to miss out. There's a lot of FOMO out there in the sector that I'm seeing from working with you, Christy, that's coming across from the corporate vendors. And yeah, most organizations, even in the corporate world where they've got lots of resources, they still don't have the governance or literacy to use it safely. And so the mismatch between the urgency piece and the capability certainly creates a crisis of confidence about how to deploy, I think. And so certainly from the ground up in the community, you're seeing this shadow use of AI proliferate, really, where staff and executives are just, as Ian said, using tools in a simple way to just try and be more productive. But as Ian highlighted, the risks are really huge where unsanctioned cloud apps or different tools become a front and center privacy or data protection issue, and the ethical boundaries as well, where, especially for a sector that has such high standards, is something to think about. So I think maybe it's about taking a pause, Christy, and really stepping back and being deliberate about where to deploy it. But certainly, there's no crisis around the capability of the technology. It's really about how to deploy it and when to deploy it, I think.
Thanks, Brian. Just wanted to ask, could you explain what is shadow use of AI?
Sure. Well, if you think about productivity tools like Dropbox or WhatsApp and how they operate across both corporate and philanthropic sectors, people just want to get stuff done. And so whilst corporate IT may not have deployed a tool officially through the normal channels, people start to use WhatsApp on their mobile phone to set up a group and share information, and that certainly happened with Dropbox when it came up for file sharing, and the exact same thing is now happening here. People are plugging in to these tools sensitive information, confidential information that simply shouldn't be there, and as Ian stated, nobody knows how that is being used for good or bad by the tools that are being used on the front line. So I think that's what I mean by shadow AI. It really brings into question trust and risk, and the crisis around that, around compliance, data leakage, and really all of the accountability gaps that you would normally have in any standardized organization.
So you mean people using ChatGPT might not be authorized, or another kind of Gen AI tool, whatever it is, it might not be authorized by the not-for-profit or the Philanthropic Foundation, but people are using it for efficiencies, but not aware of those risks. Yeah.
Just to round out on that one, Christy, I think that the issue there is that this is moving so fast, as Ian just said, that people just expect this level of productivity in their home life these days, and so it's crossing over into work life. And so, the FOMO is real, but the speed of change is also real. Okay.
Thanks, Brian. Jo, what's your take on this?
Well, at the risk of sounding cliche and not to double up on all the great information that Ian and Brian have just covered with regards to data security, privacy guidelines, assurance frameworks, etc., good relationships are based on trust, right? And that's particularly important when it comes to wanting to achieve common goals through funding partnerships. And at the end of the day, people do give to people. And again, that's through trusted relationships. It's through a really solid evidence base and your ability to demonstrate your track record to your potential funding partners. So I think from a funding and philanthropic perspective, we need to be asking the question how we can use the AI so that that trust is not compromised, and use it to create efficiencies, but within those really strict guardrails that we all need to take responsibility for knowing. There's a lot of conversation in the marketplace at the moment, a lot of tools etc., that are coming into market about Gen AI tools that, for example, draft grant applications. The question that begs to be asked is, where is all your organisational information going? Are your team savvy and educated and working within your organisation's policy frameworks around what can and cannot be uploaded into that tool? We have unfortunately heard of cases where very sensitive client of an organisation that's a service delivery provider has been uploaded into a non-confidential space to help prepare case studies and evidence reports in constructing proposals. So all of those things need to be addressed, absolutely. We've also got to question the authenticity of the voice that's coming, and how do funders know what they're reading? Is it a sales document that has been generated by information that AI has produced, or is it again based on true evidence of your organisation's track record and what you're actually doing? And we all know we all work in the space, right? We all sit on boards and whatnot, and we are hearing countless amazing case studies of all of the mission-driven organisations that we are supporting, whether they through our customers, whether they're through boards that we sit on. A lot of that information isn't available anywhere but within that organisation's own IP and knowledge. And so you need to be able to tell that story yourself. And I think if we rely on AI to be developing our organisational key messages, our program delivery plans, where is the thinking coming from that's actually informing the way we run our business for purpose to achieve our mission? Where's the strategic thinking coming from? So I think absolutely great tool for efficiency creative, but effectiveness, I think we really need to examine that.
Thanks, Jo. And I guess the other element of this is, organisations, not-for-profits, they need to have trust with those people that they're working with, their whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
And very quickly, through sort of a high risk use of AI or a data leakage, that trust is burnt pretty much immediately.
It takes a long time to build a trusted relationship, but it takes a very short moment in time to destroy that trust.
Yeah. Marcus, we've heard a little bit about, the risks, examples, some context. I'd love for you to share examples of what you're seeing where AI has been used unsafely, without guardrails, for example, or as well as really successful examples where it's implemented safely.
Thanks, Christy. Look, I'll start by saying I don't have enough fingers and toes to count the number of times I've had a non-profit approach me with the stress of someone's used a free Gen AI tool to draft a client letter, including name, address, conditions, medical details, and they're going, oh my gosh, what do I do? Right, and that's never an easy answer or a thing to support them through, because the real answer is that there's value in educating staff ahead of the game. It's really difficult to manage the problem, as a particular New South Wales authority found with 200 odd clients only last week after the fact. I suspect many have also seen some amazing US health policy statements that I think used AI without any human checking or appropriate human checking, and they were released with misquoted and hallucinogenic references. It's like, are you serious? So this really should give you an insight into some of the AI challenges, right? It's not a field of 1,000 gorgeous flowers, but it's also not doom and gloom. We've been involved in scores of successful AI projects. When we think about what should we do, what shouldn't we do, how do we design it, how do we build it, don't assume the answer that's coming out of the AI engine is correct. Insert a human in the process. Consider what the likelihood is they will put appropriate brain power into validating the answer And if they don't, what's the impact, right? Is it serious? Is it inconsequential? Think that through before using AI in any sort of organizational situation. So I was chatting to Milo Cruz, the exec GM responsible for AI deployment at the Salvation Army last week. He's been really successful using some AI tools and built tools to reach into their myriad of systems, because like many large non-profits, they don't just have one system that's well structured and easy, and they've got a lot and staff need to navigate those. And he's a lot of success with AI reaching into those systems and presenting useful information to staff relevant to context so they can get on with their job and work directly with clients with appropriate background, not trying to work out all the details and navigate internal stuff. Like that, we do see a lot of organisations building internal agents to collect data in context and provide it to staff. Right, both with Copilot, with Gemini, with other tools. There's lots of options. We've also seen a number of clients, Wombat Housing, Alcohol and Drug Foundation, two good examples, building agents or bots to engage with clients and provide useful information. No, they're not providing dosage information, but they're because the public has a different ability to put appropriate thought through that process and of critical information thinking, but it is useful information and it's curated for the public, and there's been some real support, both in terms of engagement with the information, ongoing referral for service, etc. So that's really good. My favourite has got to be Clean Up Australia, who's been doing some great work. And the conversation really started with, we've got lots of paper forms that all our volunteers fill in. We'd like to move to an electronic form. And through the conversation, it moved to let's have an online form to let's take a photo of the rubbish that's being cleaned up. Let's run image recognition AI over the top of it. That will automatically count the number of items that have been cleaned, as well as categorize them into plastics, metal, recycle, etc. And what do you know? This is saving mountains of volunteer times and dramatically improving the data quality that comes out of it. So there's a few stories of AI for good, and it can make a big difference when it's used thoughtfully and appropriately.
Yeah, and it's the perfect use case, isn't it? Why would you and how would your volunteers type into a form details all about that rubbish that they're helping you clean up when a photograph is so helpful and, the AI is categorizing that? A brilliant use case and a wonderful one as well. And thank you for that, Marcus. It's very exciting to hear really positive examples. And it's clearly large organizations, small, medium size, bringing all the data together and the data governance is actually one of the foundational elements to all of this. And you mentioned that a moment ago. Ian, I just want to, I'm going to ask you what good examples you're seeing in the foundation or not-for-profit space. But before I do, that word hallucination came up. And for everybody who might not want to ask the question, but wants to know, what is AI hallucination and how does it happen?
Another really good question, Christy. So without wanting to make AI seem much more human than it really is, hallucination is an attempt to give you an answer when it doesn't know the answer and doesn't have sufficient boundaries around the limitations of the answer to stop it doing it. So the great example in some recent legal cases have been where there's been references to case precedent and those case precedent just don't exist. And when the submission is made to the court, the judge reads it and says, can you find me these cases that you're relying on because I can't see them in my systems? Turns out they don't exist. And seems like my wife's a lawyer. I find that particular example very, very funny. She doesn't. The challenge, of course, is that some researcher will have used AI in this case to generate the draft. The draft went to a more senior person who cross-checked it, went to a more senior person that cross-checked it. Ultimately, the partner submits it. And there's a chain of trust or a chain of assumptions right back down to that relatively junior person who just used this great tool, which was able to pull in all his information and of course didn't go to the trouble of checking those cases. There are many subtle variations on hallucination. Sometimes it's mostly right, but there's a little bit wrong. And sometimes it's completely obviously wrong. So there are really, really subtle issues around how the algorithm converges down to an answer, trying to respond to your original question. I hope that was clear.
Thank you. It's a good explanation. And I suppose we couldn't have a conversation about AI trust crisis without talking about Deloitte. And it's really the same kind of context, isn't it? Just amplifying how dangerous it is when you don't have human oversight and if you're relying on Gen AI for this kind of work, Ian.
Yeah. It's actually, I mean, we talk about human in the loop as the protective mechanism to ensure that things are done appropriately and we can test and measure. But the case of that submission, the legal submission in the US, the things that recently were described about what Deloitte did, there are humans in the loop. The issue really is that the humans who would rely on humans normally now relying on humans who are relying on AI, and there's a real subtlety there. But I definitely don't want people to leave today to think AI bad. But to getting to some of the points that have been raised so far, care needs to be applied into how the AI is being used and the relative harm that could derive from the use of it, or in fact, if it's a really benign case, then it's with confidence, given the potential consequences. But thinking through those consequences and thinking about who would be impacted is a really important part of preparing yourself to use AI.
Thanks, Ian. And I think that's part of the translation of the AI assurance guardrails into, how not-for-profits can work and use it safely. I can see questions coming in. This is really marvelous. Please drop as many questions in as you like. We're going to get to an open Q&A in a moment. Before I do that, I mean, Ian, can you share any examples of not-for-profits and foundations with safe practices, good things that you're seeing?
There are lots of really good examples. So the simple ones are process automation. So manual tasks where tools are being used to follow those processes and to create digital equivalents of them. So automating click, click, click becomes just an automated process, and the algorithm is busily following a human worker doing it in order to create those automated shortcuts. That's really, really common. Things like scheduling and appointments, also really, really common, but increasingly being used in areas to check in on the word I'm going to use as patients, people who are participating in clinical trials. It's really expensive when someone drops out of a clinical trial. Not only do you lose the value of that person's data, you actually potentially lose a great deal of diversity. So generative AI being used to call and check on people to say, are you okay? Are you following the protocols? Are you doing the things you need to do? Helping people not get readmitted to hospital. Again, some relatively early stage, but again, using AI just to ask people how they're going, have they taken their medication. There are the examples of things like tracking garbage or looking at litter are really good no regrets use cases. New South Wales has an example where garbage trucks are fitted with cameras, and those cameras do road repair recognition and automatically report and log those. But there are lots and lots of cases, but most of them are not very exciting, but are really good in terms of reducing paperwork or reducing burden for people who are trying to summarize or trying to record or trying to capture an interview or capture a patient engagement or a client engagement. Lots and lots and lots of good use cases.
Thanks, Ian. Very interesting. And look, I think obviously we know that Gen AI has kind of exploded everything. And Brian, I really just wanted to talk now about the technology and the impact on society.
Yeah.
And so we have Gen AI and we have all the interesting and useful use cases for AI that we've heard Marcus and Ian and Joe speak about.
Yeah.
So in your view, like, obviously you've had a front row seat to technology for the last 25 years. So have I. We've seen lots of automation through, work that we've done with technology companies. Is this different? In your view, is AI a force a transformative force?
Yeah.
Or is it simply another technology?
It's definitely a force, in my view, not just a technology. If you think about technology and what it brings to the table, it generally automates tasks and makes life easier that way. But when you think about AI, it's as Ian was saying before about the hallucinations, they occur because AI is automating judgment in a large degree. And so when you get into automating judgment, that's where the effects become hugely more profound, and the applications of it become much more profound as well. We've talked about decision making, governance, societal trust. If you think about the top Gen AI use cases as per the HBR, Harvard Business Review last year, it was things like generating AI ideas, helping edit text, troubleshooting. The number one use case this year is therapy or companionship. So that's getting into something that's much, much deeper than just, help me do this quicker or easier. It's really starting to become life companions of people in the future, for situations where people don't have one. So it's accelerating at a much faster pace than anything else that we've seen. We've seen internet come and go in terms of the arrival of that, cloud, the smartphone. This thing is just blowing all of those things away. And, we're all running hard to keep up around the governance structure for that. And I think the challenge for this sector, for the not-for-profit and philanthropy sector, is to really think about how to harness AI as a force for empathy and inclusion, not just efficiency. I think that when that happens, then we'll really be the winners out of this. But there's a bit of way to go before we get there, and some governance to apply, I would suggest.
Thanks, Brian. And it is incredibly complex. I mean, I'm here in Canberra at the National Forum on Wellbeing, and we heard a speaker yesterday from the OEDC, and the number one concern globally is the loneliness epidemic in wellbeing. So a lot of complexity to think through, of course, for our sector. Marcus, would you agree or disagree? Is AI a force or is it a tech, and why?
Oh, look, my answer's got to be yes and yes. My comment is, though, I don't think it matters. The question for me is, it's how do you use it? Is it a hammer and you're looking for a nail? Is it a force for good? Is it a force for evil? It's up to you. That's my comment. If we look at our digital technology report that we do every year across Australia and New Zealand, I think that the sector is moving from an AI perspective, and they're starting to recognise the potential of a force for good. Last year we really categorised in the AI space as individuals we use it, non-profits didn't know what to do with it, right? And every year it comes through. The biggest challenges in the sector are lack of resources, lack of funds. And so that always creates conundrums, particularly when change is involved, because change requires time, effort, and often funds. This year, and results aren't released yet, still evolving, but early insights indicate that around 67% of organisations were now using AI. About lack of funding is a key barrier to deploying and sustaining tools. 42% don't really see AI as a priority yet, and only around 15% have some sort of policy or guideline in place to support staff to do the right thing. My real message from all of that is you need to consider it. You need to think about, is it of value? You can't ignore it because your staff aren't, and you don't want to be in the stories we told at the start. And by golly gosh, if it's, it can deliver real value to a large number of organisations. The question is how to realise that. Is that pilots? Is it trials? Is it tests, etc.? And that's, I suppose, for me, what's really important. You can choose whether it's a force or a technology. You can choose whether it's for good or for bad. It's up to us. Thanks, Christy.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. Great points, including the lack of funding. And I think that's across the whole investment in technology and systems, right? And underinvestment in tech and data to provide, like, the foundations, I think, for safe and ethical use of AI and some of those use cases you spoke about. Joe, what's your take? Is AI a force or a tech?
I loved Marcus's comments on that, it is a force for both good and evil, depending on how we use it and how it's implemented, right? I think that the rate at which it's accelerated, it just lends to the word forceful, and the speed. I think that what we need to remember is that we need the people, we need the guardrails, we need the data, and then we lay the AI on top of it. And it's how we have all those initial things first, and then it's the resourcing, as has been pointed out. How do we build the capability of the people, put the guardrails in place to use our own data, and for organisations to realise that the AI is only as good as the data it's sitting across, right? So if we're relying on it to find funding sources that isn't based from a substantial verified data set, how do we know it's not providing hallucinogenic results? And we could literally write a book with examples of AI hallucinating on funding opportunities that are available when you're using the general tools, because it's finding whatever is out there on the web and the internet about about different funding opportunities or not, and it's continually getting incorrect information fed into it as well. So I think that I think it's definitely a force, but we need to really invest as organisations, and I think it's a space that philanthropy can certainly help the capability of the for-purpose sector in building that capability piece and investing in the people and the tech that's needed. And investing in the implementation and setup of those guardrails, and the education piece is critical. We need our people within our organisations to be taught how to use it ethically and responsibly.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you for all your questions coming through. I'm going to ask a question now because this has been amplified by a few people. So interested in the panel's view on what rough quantum of risk reduction, benefit realization comes from just getting off those free platforms and going to paid versions. We did a no more free AI amnesty and moved to basic paid as the very first thing we did. So would love to hear your thoughts, Ian or Marcus.
I think it's jumping right in. I think it's a really, really good idea, because one of the big issues is inadvertent release of confidential or sensitive information. So just that in itself gives you a safer place to start to experiment and to see the art of the possible. But even then, it's still worth thinking about what could go wrong, what the potential harms are, how reversible they are, and start to give people ways of triaging a use case in that safer environment, but a use case to say, this one's okay, this one you need to get help with, or you need to seek extra expert advice about.
I think I'll add to that and say, don't stop there. My comment would be, and I haven't said this, so it's worth saying now. AI doesn't sit separate, shouldn't sit separate from your digital ecosystem. All right. Mm-hmm. If your data's in one spot, if your files are in whatever, the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, the Google, the Dropbox, whatever, if AI connects to that and understands what a good resource is as opposed to crap that should be deleted, you'll get far more value out of your generative AI tools than the others. And all of a sudden, and what we find when people do early pilots, they go, oh my gosh, my information's a mess. I can't use AI until I clean it up. So I suppose my comment is, yes, getting off the free version, supporting staff to use them appropriately is really important. But there's a lot more value that can be delivered and a lot more time that can be saved without, that should be driven towards, and thinking about how you can do that as an organisation is really important.
Thanks, Marcus. And now you've got the mic. Just another question, a follow-on, I think, that's related from Josh. Thanks, Josh, for this. Marcus, is it fair to say from your experience where AI is most useful is not actually the LLMs like ChatGPT, but more so the AI algorithms that are more specialized for things like you described earlier, image identification and data processing?
I'm going to have a bet each way, Josh, because I think my comment is most nonprofits can't afford the more specialized stuff. So that's my starting base, right? Yeah, I'm afraid I forget the stats from this year's unpublished survey. It's like 2% of organizations are building custom tools. And yes, we've done quite a lot of those, as you've already heard, right? But it's only 2%. And you've got to have volume and you've got to have scale. You've got to have the ability to maintain that. There's nothing I hate more in the nonprofit sector than building a tool you can't afford to maintain. But you can get real value if you've got all those things. So the majority of nonprofits, we're seeing value with those simplest customizable tools, whether it be Gemini, Notebook LM, Copilot, and the like, which are those simpler things because they're far more cost effective and easier to maintain. So the answer is, depending on what you want to do, they're both great. If you're not sure, start simple and build off it.
Yeah. Thanks, Marcus. That's really practical, good advice. Joe, great question for you from Mark. Thanks, Mark. And for those that are also wanting to know the answer to this one, are you seeing resistance from philanthropy around funding the use of AI? And I guess I'm also really interested in, we've had lots of conversations around if the inundation, is philanthropy being inundated with applications that have been generated by AI, and what does this do to the funding system, if anything?
I love that question. Certainly our anecdotal feedback with the many conversations that we have with funders, and I know a lot of you are online. I'd love to see your comments in the box, but the evidence would indicate that yes, they can tell when a funding application has been generated by AI. There have also been many reported cases of, wow, where are all these applications coming from? So while it's always been a competitive space, they're getting a lot more applications and they all sound very similar. So again, coming back to the earlier point I made around authenticity, putting your organisational voice forward and your organisational evidence and data, case studies, etc. It's just getting sort of meshed into, one of these non-private AI generators that are producing these applications. When it comes to resistance to funding AI capability, look, tech has been funded by philanthropy for a long time. Building organisational capacity and capability is a really well-funded project, if you like, in the sector. And there's a move, and we're seeing more and more philanthropists realise that core capacity building, and if tech and AI fits within that, then it is absolutely something that can and is being funded. As always, though, it comes back to how well you know your program need and what you're going to do with the funding. So you need to provide the evidence of what the need is, what are the efficiencies going to be created, so what are the outputs that are going to benefit your organisation from bringing in an AI platform within your own data sets, as Marcus has talked about, building your own agent capability so that you're building tools that sit across your own organisational data, because that's when we're going to see the real efficiencies being created in the fundraising space, I feel. But it is about how well you put the case of evidence forward for that funding based on a proper business plan. You've got to show that you've budgeted for this. You've got expertise coming into your organisation to implement this. This is how it's going to transform and impact the way we are enabled to deliver our mission. And I think that's what we always have to remember when it comes to funding. How is this enabling us to more efficiently and effectively deliver our mission?
Thanks, Joe. Really helpful and great advice and insights there. So I just, look, from our perspective, we see that there's a very large data and now AI divide. And so organizations that we're working with, we're helping them address that and build that. But I mean, I think, Marcus, with Info Exchange and your work, we're really seeing, I think, together this huge need for investment in data governance, data systems that are the foundation, and then AI that could sit on top of that with assurance. Did you want to add anything?
I'm going to go bigger again and say there's a need for investment in digital per se. AI is part of that.
Yeah.
We're a big believer in the fact that many organisations have struggled to invest in IT. They've now got a significant millstone around their necks, around their legs from an organisational perspective. That often takes years of considered thought to get out of. And so whether you're, up in the productive, mature digital space, or whether you're behind that, AI is an important thing that needs to be considered, and investment is required. I think the thing that frustrates me is expecting philanthropy to fund all this change is not realistic, nor is it fair. So that's my comment for all funders on the call, and happy to talk. There's a very strong movement to move towards pay what it takes and ensure that infrastructure is appropriate. I cannot put enough oomph behind that, because without that happening, and I was in a data integration policy workshop yesterday, things are going to continue to be, or services are going to continue to go to organisations that don't have the right things in place, and they're always going to struggle to make the most of the potential productivity improvements, to get insights from their data, understand their outcomes, and provide the best services. So it's really important that story starts to change over the next decade, and I'm really excited to see a growing coalition of the willing moving towards that.
Great, thanks, Marcus. So I'm going to share the next steps. I can just see that I've got a one takeaway. What do we take away from this? I'll share some of the resources and the advice that we suggest that you take. Before I do that, Ian, I just wanted to highlight that I saw just the other day, last week, the University of Melbourne and KPMG published the results of a global study, 48,000 people, into the trust, attitudes and use of AI. And it seems to be similar to a number of other recent research studies I've read and I'm across. There's so much coming out. In Australia, only 36% of people trust AI. 77% believe AI regulation is required and are expecting oversight from government. 77% are unsure of online content and can it be trusted or is it AI generated? And 90% want laws and actions to combat AI generated misinfo. What's the answer here on the issue of regulation? Another big question for you, sir.
That is a heck of a question, Christy. Australia has not regulated AI specifically, has instead called out that we have regulation to protect consumers, to protect the public, to protect privacy, a whole lot of existing regulation. The challenge, of course, is when you look at that regulation from the perspective of you're no longer regulating a person who's dealing with your data or privacy or your consumer rights, but an algorithm who's dealing with your data or privacy or consumer rights. It stretches the way the regulation works. Humans act at human speed and behave in human ways and are relatively consistent, broadly speaking. Algorithms operate at machine speeds, can change in a microsecond, and so your way of thinking about how the algorithm performs potentially could change very rapidly if it gets a software update or it gets a different set of data. So I'm personally of the view that we do need regulation, personal perspective, not reflective of any organization, but there has been a hesitancy to do it, partly while we watch the rest of the world, US and UK and Europe, partly as we see things like standards increasingly bubble up, and in Europe the regulation is based on standards, those ISO IEC standards, and partly it's testing the existing regulation. Something will happen very, very soon during November. Watch this space. There will be a status update of what Australia's AI capability is, and I think we can expect a stronger sense of direction of travel to come about from the government in November.
Great, thanks, Ian. So, Angus, can you please share the slides? These are the resources, because I'm getting lots of questions in the chat. Thank you, everyone, on what do we do? What are the tips? What do we actually do? These are the resources. So we've prepared an AI what to do next steps pack for your boards and executives, and a presentation if you would like that. You can access all these resources or request them through the QR code here, and we'll send them out to you with this recording as well. We are translating the AI voluntary safety standards and guardrails for not-for-profits and philanthropy, and I believe that's also something you're doing as well at Info Exchange, Marcus, so we're aligning on that to give these resources available to you. You can book in with us to learn how to apply AI safely for impact measurement, which we have, of course, so many of our customers doing that work. And then, Angus, can you drop in the chat the links to those 2 articles, really, that instigated this conversation where the Data Platform for Philanthropy Australia have been for a number of years. And I wrote 2 articles to inform like what you need to know about data and AI. The first one underscores the importance of data governance, First Nations data sovereignty and governance, and then of course AI assurance and how to, and then other things you need to know. Strategic Grants has given you access to AI for grant writing article and a best practice tracker. And then of course Info Exchange, Marcus, the resources that you and the team have created are rich, robust, brilliant education, lots of webinars, lots of resources and tools, including an AI policy template. So please, everyone, grab that information, and that hopefully would be very helpful for you. I think that it's particularly important that we do carry on the conversation, and so I think, you know, there's a lot to cover in this, and so we'll be working on it. I think someone in the chat said it would be a good idea if we could also, you know, have further deep dives on this, which we'll work on. So thank you. I really want to thank our panelists for your time, and for everyone for giving up an hour of your time today. Thank you very much for the wonderful conversation in the chat. We will aim to answer some of those that we didn't get to in our follow-up, and really hope that you stay connected to us. And I also would love to invite you, if you're interested, to join our next session. And that one is about how you turn data into influence. We work with MTC and a number of other organisations to use data for influencing policy, and we're doing this one with our partners, Tank. So thank you again, everyone. Have a marvellous day. I really appreciate your time, all the questions, and thanks again to Ian, Joe, Marcus and Brian. I really appreciate it.